Ethan Harper lived in a world that most people could only dream of. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed golden sunsets and twinkling night lights. Expensive furniture, rare artwork, and the latest technology adorned every corner of his home. Yet, despite all the luxury surrounding him, Ethan felt an emptiness that no wealth could fill. He was 38, successful beyond measure, and yet profoundly alone. Every day seemed to follow the same pattern. He spent long hours in boardroom meetings, where colleagues and investors spoke in polished tones about profits, projections, and acquisitions. To an outsider, it was an impressive display of power and influence. But to Ethan, these conversations were hollow. No one asked how he felt, no one shared a genuine laugh, and the casual banter he witnessed on television seemed like a world he would never belong to. Even the lavish parties he attended, charity galas, corporate celebrations, and elite social gatherings, felt like performances. He smiled politely, exchanged pleasantries, and nodded at compliments, yet the laughter never reached his eyes. The conversations were superficial, revolving around designer labels, exotic vacations, and the latest gossip. Ethan often found himself wandering to the edge of a room, watching others connect effortlessly while he remained an observer, detached and unseen. Amid this sterile world of luxury and expectation was Clara Bennett, his assistant. In her late 20s, Clara was the perfect combination of intelligence, wit, and grounded practicality. She had an uncanny ability to anticipate Ethan's needs before he even voiced them, and she navigated his chaotic schedule with seamless precision. Yet, despite her professionalism, she brought a sense of warmth and humanity into his life that no other person in his circle could. She had the rare talent of seeing past his polished exterior, noticing the subtle lines of fatigue under his eyes and the faint tension in his shoulders after a long day. Their dynamic was delicate but comforting. Ethan was polite yet reserved, often retreating into silence when overwhelmed by social obligations or personal thoughts. Clara, on the other hand, was observant, patient, and quietly empathetic. She knew when to speak, when to offer a suggestion, and when to simply provide a listening ear. Their interactions were professional, but there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of each other's humanity in a world obsessed with appearances. As Ethan reviewed a stack of reports on his mahogany desk, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He envied the simplicity of genuine relationships, the kind that were unburdened by status or obligation. He thought of friends from his childhood, connections that had long faded under the weight of ambition and responsibility. He wondered what it would be like to share a laugh without considering the impression it left on others, to have someone care about him for who he was rather than the wealth he wielded. Clara noticed his distant expression and offered a small, knowing smile. Ethan returned it, a flicker of appreciation crossing his usually impassive face. In that brief exchange, he felt a sense of connection he rarely experienced, a reminder that not all relationships were transactional, and perhaps not all moments were empty. Ethan Harper's life was luxurious, enviable to many, yet profoundly lonely. And in the quiet presence of his assistant, he glimpsed a small beacon of genuine human connection, a reminder that even in the world of the rich and powerful, loneliness could be challenged by understanding and empathy. Ethan Harper's morning had begun like any other, quiet, controlled, and meticulously organized. Yet, as he sorted through his emails, one message caught his attention immediately. An invitation to the Harlington Charity Ball, one of the most prestigious annual events among the city's elite. The email was written in elegant script, emphasizing exclusivity and the importance of attendance. Photos from previous years showcased sparkling chandeliers, glittering gowns, and influential personalities mingling beneath golden arches. To the world, it was an opportunity to see and be seen. To Ethan, it was a mix of dread and temptation. He stared at the invitation for a long moment, his mind racing. The thought of attending the ball filled him with unease. Despite his wealth and status, social gatherings like this had always been his greatest source of anxiety. His friends would whisper behind his back, dissect every decision, and mock anything they perceived as a misstep. What would they think if he didn't bring a glamorous date? And yet, what if he brought the wrong one? The pressure to impress, to conform to expectations, was suffocating. Clara, who had been quietly observing him from her side of the desk, noticed the hesitation etched across his face. "You've been staring at that email for 10 minutes, she said softly, her voice calm and steady. "Do you want to go?" Ethan hesitated. I don't know. I've never been comfortable at these events. Everyone looks at me as if I'm performing, as if every move is being judged. His eyes met hers, vulnerable for a fleeting moment. I don't even know who I'd bring as a companion. Clara tilted her head thoughtfully, her eyes meeting his with quiet confidence. Why don't I come with you? She suggested gently. It might make things easier. I can help you navigate the crowd, and besides, you won't be alone. Ethan blinked, surprised by her offer. You? But, you're my assistant. They'll think, he stopped, realizing he couldn't articulate the concern without sounding foolish. They'll think what? Clara asked, her tone both playful and steady. That you value someone capable, intelligent, and poised? Or that you're brave enough to do something different? He fell silent, contemplating her words. It was true, Clara had an effortless elegance and intelligence that few in his social circle possessed. He knew his friends, wealthy, arrogant, and slightly condescending men, would be quick to mock the idea of him bringing his assistant. They would underestimate her charm, dismiss her presence as unworthy of such a prestigious event. And yet, there was a part of him that was drawn to the idea. The thought of attending the ball with someone who understood him, who could see him beyond the millionaire persona, was enticing. His mind wandered to the group of friends he regularly mingled with, men and women who wore designer labels as armor, speaking in carefully curated phrases to display wit and influence. They reveled in gossip and social superiority, subtly undermining anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of status. He imagined their reactions, half amusement, half disbelief, at the thought of him attending the ball with Clara. The prospect made him anxious, but strangely exhilarated. The internal conflict raged on. Pride tugged at him, warning him not to deviate from expectations, not to risk ridicule. Desire for companionship pulled him in the opposite direction, whispering that perhaps, for once, he could attend an event on his own terms. His gaze shifted to Clara, who waited patiently, a reassuring presence in the whirlwind of his uncertainty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan took a deep breath. You know what? Let's do it, he said with a determined nod. I'll bring you to the ball. Clara smiled, a mix of delight and quiet satisfaction lighting her features. You won't regret it, she said confidently, though her eyes hinted at the playful adventure ahead. Ethan felt a surge of anticipation, a rare thrill mingling with his anxiety. He knew the night would challenge social norms, provoke whispers, and test his courage. Yet, he also knew that having Clara by his side could transform the experience entirely. Whatever mockery awaited, he decided, he would face it, together. In that moment, Ethan Harper made a choice that would alter the course of his social world. He would attend the Harlington charity ball with Clara Bennett, his assistant and unlikely companion, stepping into an evening of scrutiny, elegance, and, unbeknownst to him, a night that would forever change the way he viewed friendship, companionship, and love. The day of the Harlington charity ball arrived with a crisp, golden morning that filtered softly through Ethan Harper's penthouse windows. Ethan stood in front of his expansive wardrobe, carefully assessing his options. Each suit was tailored to perfection, a testament to both his wealth and meticulous attention to detail. He ran his fingers over a deep navy velvet blazer, appreciating the subtle sheen and precise stitching. The white dress shirt beneath was perfectly pressed, and his polished leather shoes gleamed in the morning light. Yet, despite his usual attention to appearances, he felt an unfamiliar tension knotted in his chest. Tonight was different. This wasn't just another social gathering, it was a step into vulnerability, and he would not face it alone. Clara entered the room, carrying a carefully chosen dress for herself, a soft ivory gown that hugged her figure with understated elegance. Her natural beauty was complemented by the delicate embroidery and flowing fabric, giving her a timeless charm that drew Ethan's gaze immediately. She moved with effortless grace, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, framing a face that could command attention without a single word. The transformation from professional assistant to elegant companion was subtle yet striking. It wasn't just the dress, the polished shoes, or the refined accessories, it was the confidence radiating from her every movement that captured Ethan's attention. As Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, he couldn't help but notice Clara in a way he hadn't before. Her intelligence, warmth, and unwavering support had always been evident, but now they were amplified by the elegance she carried herself with. She was more than an assistant, she was a partner in navigating his world, someone who brought balance, perspective, and lightness into the gravity of his life. Ethan's heart swelled with a mix of admiration and something he struggled to name, something deeper, more personal. Clara, meanwhile, was grappling with her own set of emotions. She had long admired Ethan's dedication, his quiet strength beneath the polished exterior, and the rare glimpses of vulnerability he allowed her to witness. Yet tonight was different. Tonight, she would step into a world of scrutiny, where status and appearances were measured above character. The thought of entering the Harlington charity ball, of facing whispers and judgment from the city's elite, sent a ripple of apprehension through her. Still, there was excitement too, a thrill of being seen, not just as an assistant, but as someone who belonged, even if only for the evening. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she would navigate the night with dignity and poise. Ethan noticed her brief hesitation and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Clara," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something before tonight begins. I don't say this often, or to anyone, really. But your support, it means more than you can imagine. These events, this life, it's lonely. I've spent so long surrounded by people who care more about appearances than anything real. And you've been the one constant who reminds me that I don't have to face it alone." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She knew he rarely shared his feelings, and this moment of candidness was a rare glimpse into the man behind the millionaire facade. "Ethan," she replied softly, "I've always known. And I'll be here tonight, just like always. You're not alone." The penthouse seemed to hold its breath as the pair exchanged that understanding. A quiet anticipation settled between them, a mingling of fear and excitement for what lay ahead. Ethan's usual composure was tempered by nervous energy, while Clara's apprehension was tempered by confidence and resolve. Together, they represented a balance, an unspoken agreement to face the challenges of the evening side by side. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden shadows across the room, Ethan and Clara made their final preparations. Ethan straightened his tie one last time, brushing invisible lint from his blazer, while Clara adjusted the delicate folds of her gown, ensuring every detail was flawless. The anticipation of the ball, the whispers of elite society, the grandeur of the venue, the potential for judgment and admiration, hung palpably in the air. Each moment heightened the tension, each heartbeat quickened with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Tonight would test them both in ways beyond appearances. Yet, as they stepped toward the door, the sense of partnership and quiet courage they shared promised that whatever the night held, they would face it together, ready for the world to see them in a light neither had experienced before. The limousine glided smoothly up the winding drive leading to the Grand Harlington estate, its sleek black exterior reflecting the ornate lanterns that lined the path. Ethan Harper adjusted his cufflinks nervously, though his suit was flawless and his hair meticulously styled. Clara Bennett, sitting beside him, radiated quiet confidence, her elegant gown catching the ambient light, each delicate detail accentuating her poise and natural charm. The moment was surreal, the weight of expectation and scrutiny pressed on them, yet neither flinched. As the limousine doors opened, a wave of light and sound enveloped them. The grand entrance was a spectacle of opulence. Towering crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors, casting fractured light across velvet-draped walls. The orchestra played softly in the background, strings and piano weaving a delicate symphony that mingled with laughter and clinking glasses. Guests in exquisite gowns and tuxedos moved gracefully across the ballroom, conversing in measured tones that suggested wealth and influence, yet carried the subtle weight of judgment. Ethan's stomach tightened as he took his first step onto the marble floor. Immediately, whispers rippled through the crowd. His friends, men and women who prided themselves on social superiority, exchanged smirks and subtle nods, their eyes lingering on Clara with obvious amusement. "He brought his assistant," one whispered, his tone dripping with disbelief. Another chuckled, clearly expecting an awkward scene to unfold. The air seemed charged with scrutiny, and Ethan felt a pang of vulnerability. But Clara was unshaken. She walked beside him with serene elegance, her posture impeccable, her gaze confident yet approachable. She smiled politely at passers-by, exchanging courteous nods with other guests, and moved as though the grandeur surrounding them were merely a backdrop to her calm presence. Her composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the shallow, performative behaviors of the elite around her. She was a breath of fresh air in a room where appearances often mattered more than substance. Ethan couldn't help but notice the subtle shift. Guests who had initially glanced at them with curiosity now lingered, intrigued by Clara's poise and intelligence. Conversations paused briefly as heads turned, not with ridicule, but with genuine interest. There was a magnetic quality to her presence, a quiet strength and grace that drew attention without demanding it. He realized, with a mix of awe and pride, that Clara had already begun to transform the perception of the evening. A particularly tense moment arose near the champagne table. A socialite, draped in diamonds and dripping with condescension, approached Clara with a patronizing smile. "Well, I must say, it's unexpected to see you here," she said, her voice laced with subtle mockery. "I wasn't aware assistants received invitations." Clara's eyes met hers steadily, her smile unshaken. "Thank you for noticing," she replied, her tone polite yet edged with quiet authority. "I'm grateful for the invitation, and I intend to enjoy the evening like everyone else." There was no hint of defensiveness, no trace of insecurity, only calm assurance and eloquence. The socialite's smirk faltered, replaced by a brief, begrudging nod. Guests who had been nearby exchanged subtle glances of admiration, impressed by Clara's deft handling of the situation. Ethan felt a rush of emotions surge within him, pride, astonishment, and a deep, resonant admiration. He had underestimated the impact of her presence, the way she commanded attention without demanding it. He watched her interact with ease, her laughter light and genuine, her intelligence apparent in every conversation. For the first time, he saw her not just as his assistant, but as someone who could navigate and even thrive in this world of scrutiny and superficiality. As they moved further into the ballroom, Ethan's confidence began to grow alongside hers. Each glance of approval she received, each subtle acknowledgement from the guests, reinforced the truth he had long ignored. Clara's presence was transformative, not only for him but for the atmosphere around them. He felt a quiet surge of gratitude for her unwavering support, for the courage she radiated, and for the undeniable way she made him feel seen and understood. They reached a balcony overlooking the glittering cityscape, a brief moment of respite from the crowd. Ethan inhaled deeply, the tension easing slightly as he glanced at Clara. "You're extraordinary," he murmured, almost to himself. She caught his eye and smiled, a mixture of amusement and understanding flickering across her face. In that instant, Ethan Harper realized that tonight would be different. The ridicule of his friends, the scrutiny of the elite, none of it mattered in the presence of someone who possessed both grace and substance. Clara's elegance, intelligence, and quiet strength had not only held its own, they had shifted the room, commanding respect and admiration where judgment had been expected. As the orchestra swelled and laughter echoed around them, Ethan felt a profound sense of pride and anticipation. The night was just beginning, and with Clara by his side, he was ready to face it, no longer alone, and no longer uncertain of the impact her presence could make. The grand ballroom buzzed with conversation, crystal glasses clinking as chandeliers cast shimmering light across the polished floors. Ethan Harper followed Clara Bennett through the crowd, careful to stay close but allowing her the freedom to engage with the guests. What had begun as an anxious experiment, bringing his assistant to the Harlington Charity Ball, was quickly unfolding into something far more remarkable. Clara moved effortlessly, her poise and confidence turning every glance and whisper into admiration rather than mockery. She first approached a small cluster of influential philanthropists, a mix of men and women who were usually reserved and calculated in their social interactions. Clara's intelligence quickly became evident as she engaged them in conversation about the charity's goals, asking insightful questions and offering thoughtful suggestions. Her wit and charm drew smiles, nods, and even laughter, subtle yet genuine. Ethan, standing just a few feet away, watched with a sense of pride that he hadn't anticipated. He realized that Clara was not simply holding her own, she was elevating the evening, turning curiosity into respect and judgment into intrigue. Meanwhile, a few of Ethan's friends, previously smug and condescending, began to shift uncomfortably. Their whispers, once tinged with amusement at the thought of Ethan's choice, had grown quieter, replaced by subtle expressions of surprise and even envy. One of them, a man who prided himself on charm and social dominance, tried to intervene. He approached Clara with a practiced grin and a smooth, almost rehearsed introduction. "I didn't expect to see you here, Miss Bennett. Tell me, do you always make such a memorable entrance?" he asked, a tone meant to flatter but also to test her boundaries. Clara's response was calm, composed, and effortlessly clever. "Thank you," she replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I always aim to leave a good impression, though I must admit I'm more focused on enjoying the evening than on appearances." Her subtle yet sharp wit left the man momentarily speechless, his rehearsed charm crumbling in the face of her effortless intelligence. Ethan suppressed a chuckle, impressed not only by her ability to handle the situation but by the graceful way she had subtly outclassed his friend without a hint of malice. As the night continued, Clara's interactions with the guests revealed layers of her personality that Ethan had always admired but now saw in a new light. She discussed philanthropic initiatives with passion, offered insightful commentary on current events, and shared thoughtful observations that drew genuine interest from those around her. Her presence was magnetic, and the ballroom seemed to respond to her energy. Ethan felt a growing realization that she was no longer just his assistant, no longer merely a companion for the night. She was a force that could transform the atmosphere, command respect, and subtly shift social dynamics with grace and intelligence. Ethan's gaze kept returning to Clara. He noticed how effortlessly she navigated conversations, the way her laughter drew others in, and the subtle way she made him feel seen and appreciated without words. He had always known she was competent and perceptive, but witnessing her in this environment, commanding admiration without even trying, made him feel something entirely new, a profound admiration mixed with a longing that went beyond professional respect. He felt proud, not only because she reflected well on him, but because he could see her brilliance fully in the light of others' recognition. Clara, in turn, subtly observed Ethan's reactions. She noticed his softened expression, the slight ease in his posture, the small, almost imperceptible smiles that he allowed himself. She recognized the quiet pride and admiration in his eyes, and it warmed her. There was an unspoken exchange between them, a recognition that the night was changing their dynamic, revealing emotions and connections neither had fully acknowledged before. The evening grew lively, with the orchestra transitioning to a more playful, upbeat melody. Ethan found himself leaning toward Clara, genuinely engaged in conversation and laughter, no longer burdened by the social anxiety that had plagued him for hours. He began to imagine what it would be like to have her as a constant presence in his life, not just tonight but every day. The thought filled him with both excitement and a subtle fear, but the clarity of the realization was undeniable. He wanted Clara to be more than a companion for a single event. As the night progressed, Ethan's internal reflections solidified into conviction. He realized that the admiration he felt for Clara was not fleeting. It was rooted in the depth of her intelligence, warmth, and integrity. She had transformed from a professional assistant into someone who elevated his world, who made him feel more confident, more alive, and more seen than anyone else ever had. By the time the orchestra's lively tune transitioned into a gentle waltz, Ethan's decision was clear. He would no longer view Clara as merely an assistant, nor would he limit her presence in his life to professional boundaries. Tonight had revealed her impact, her strength, and the subtle ways she enriched his life. As he extended his hand to her for a dance, his eyes met hers, filled with a new determination and undeniable affection. In that moment, Ethan Harper understood something profound. He wanted Clara not just as a companion to the ball, but as a meaningful part of his life, in every sense that truly mattered. The Harlington Charity Ball had reached its zenith. The grand chandelier above the ballroom glittered like a constellation, casting prisms of light across the polished marble floor. Guests twirled gracefully, conversations hummed around the edges of the room, and the orchestra's music flowed seamlessly, wrapping the evening in an air of elegance and romance. Laughter mingled with the gentle clinking of glasses, and Ethan Harper felt a rare sense of anticipation bubbling within him, a mix of excitement and nervous energy he hadn't experienced in years. He caught sight of Clara across the room, laughing quietly with a small group of influential guests. She seemed radiant under the soft glow of the chandeliers, every movement fluid, every gesture poised yet effortless. Ethan's chest tightened in a way that surprised him, an awareness that the night, the people, and even the lavish surroundings mattered less than the person standing before him. Gathering courage, he approached her, his usual reserve tempered by a vulnerability he rarely allowed. "May I have this dance?" he asked softly, extending his hand with a tentative smile. The words carried more weight than the simplicity of the request suggested. They were a breaking of barriers, a moment of vulnerability in a world that often demanded perfection. Clara regarded him for a brief heartbeat, her eyes sparkling with amusement and something softer, something more personal. Then, with a small, graceful nod, she placed her hand in his. As they moved to the center of the ballroom, the orchestra shifted into a gentle waltz. Ethan and Clara glided across the floor, a rhythm emerging between them that felt natural and intimate. For the first time that evening, Ethan allowed himself to breathe, to exist in a space unburdened by judgment or expectation. Each step, each turn, seemed to dissolve the invisible walls that had confined him for so long. Clara's hand in his was warm, steady, and grounding, a reminder that connection could exist even amid grandeur and scrutiny. Through the dance, emotions began to surface. Ethan felt a deep sense of relief and joy, a rare freedom from the loneliness that had defined so much of his life. He thought of the countless social events he had attended, of the hollow laughter and conversations that had left him detached and isolated. The stark contrast between those memories and the present moment made his heart ache with the realization of what he had been missing. Clara's presence illuminated the difference, a reminder that genuine connection could exist even in spaces designed for spectacle and performance. Guests around them began to notice the subtle chemistry developing on the dance floor. Whispers replaced ridicule, and intrigued glances followed their graceful movements. "Look at them," someone murmured, admiration lacing the tone. "There's something genuine there." Another nodded, captivated by the effortless elegance and warmth radiating from the pair. The ballroom, once a place of judgment and superficiality, now seemed to celebrate the authenticity of their connection. For Clara, the experience was both exhilarating and unnerving. She felt the warmth of Ethan's gaze, the gentle steadiness of his hands, and the sincerity in his movements. Yet, a moment of hesitation tugged at her heart. This was more than a professional interaction, more than a companionable presence. It was stepping into a personal, emotional space she had long avoided. The line between duty and desire blurred, and for a fleeting moment, she questioned whether she should allow herself to feel so deeply, so openly. Ethan, sensing the slight tension, leaned closer and whispered with quiet honesty, "I'm glad you're here with me, Clara. I've never felt like this at one of these events before." His words, simple yet profound, seemed to melt the last remnants of her apprehension. She met his gaze and, after a heartbeat of hesitation, allowed herself to smile fully, feeling the warmth and sincerity that had drawn her to him from the start. As the waltz continued, Ethan's mind wandered to the past, the lonely dinners, the empty conversations, the feeling of being unseen despite wealth and influence. Each memory underscored the stark contrast of the present, laughter that reached his eyes, touch that reassured, and the knowledge that someone truly saw him. He realized that this dance was more than a social ritual. It was a symbolic breaking of barriers, a moment where vulnerability transformed into connection and loneliness into possibility. By the time the orchestra reached its gentle conclusion, Ethan and Clara were no longer just a millionaire and his assistant. They were two people discovering the depth of connection, the courage to embrace emotions long suppressed, and the possibility of something genuine in a world obsessed with appearances. The music and chatter of the ballroom faded slightly as Ethan stepped onto a quiet balcony, seeking a brief respite from the glittering crowd. He had been riding a wave of exhilaration since dancing with Clara, yet a shadow of anxiety lingered. No matter how well the evening had unfolded, the judgment of his friends, the wealthy circle that had long dictated social norms, still tugged at his thoughts. It was then that Marcus, one of Ethan's closest friends, appeared. Marcus was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of superiority that often made Ethan uncomfortable. His smile was sharp, his eyes glinting with subtle condescension. "Ethan," he said, voice smooth but laced with mockery, "may I have a word?" Ethan nodded cautiously, following Marcus a few steps away from the balcony railing. Marcus's tone grew more pointed once they were out of earshot. "I can't believe you actually brought her," he said, gesturing vaguely toward Clara who was speaking with other guests nearby. "Do you really think this assistant of yours belongs in this world? People will talk, Ethan. Are you serious about this?" Ethan felt a familiar tension rise in his chest, the one that often left him silent, retreating to avoid confrontation. But tonight was different. Something inside him had shifted over the course of the evening, shaped by Clara's grace, intelligence, and unwavering presence. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and met Marcus's gaze directly. "Yes," Ethan said firmly, his voice calm yet resolute. "I'm serious. Clara is more than my assistant. She's intelligent, poised, and capable of holding her own in any room, including this one. And more importantly, she's someone I respect and admire, far beyond any role she holds in my professional life." Marcus blinked, momentarily taken aback by the confidence in Ethan's tone. He opened his mouth to retort but paused, the usual smirk fading into a flicker of uncertainty. Ethan continued, his voice steady and unwavering. I don't need validation from anyone in this room to recognize her worth. If you or anyone else chooses to mock her, that reflects on you, not on her." On the balcony behind them, Clara had noticed the subtle shift in Ethan's demeanor. She had approached quietly, sensing the confrontation before even fully seeing it. Watching him stand firm, defend her, and assert his own values, her admiration deepened. She realized that the man she had long respected for his intellect and discretion also possessed courage to stand up for what he believed in, even when facing scrutiny from those who once intimidated him. As Marcus turned away, muttering something under his breath and clearly unsure how to respond, Clara stepped forward. Ethan's eyes met hers, and in that glance, unspoken emotions passed between them. She smiled softly, a mix of pride, affection, and acknowledgement, understanding that tonight had changed something fundamental in their dynamic. Internally, Clara reflected on her own feelings. For the first time, she felt fully seen, not merely as a competent assistant executing tasks, but as a person whose presence, intelligence, and character mattered deeply to someone she had grown to care about. The subtle admiration in Ethan's eyes, the unwavering respect in his words, and the quiet confidence he now displayed, all of it confirmed that she held a meaningful place in his life. Ethan, for his part, felt a sense of liberation. Confronting Marcus had not been about proving anyone wrong, it had been about asserting his own values and affirming the significance of Clara in his life. He recognized that the night had not only strengthened his confidence but also illuminated a path toward something more profound, a connection that transcended social norms, superficial judgments, and professional boundaries. As they returned to the ballroom together, side by side, the tension of the evening eased into a quiet, mutual understanding. The confrontation had set the stage for a deeper, more intimate bond between them, one built on respect, trust, and the acknowledgement of genuine feelings. Ethan Harper had grown in subtle but undeniable ways, and Clara, witnessing it firsthand, felt the promise of a new chapter, one in which she was no longer just his assistant, but an essential and valued presence in his life. The grand ballroom seemed to pause for a heartbeat as Clara Bennett stepped into the central section, her presence commanding attention in a way that transcended mere elegance. The soft glow of the chandeliers reflected off her ivory gown, its delicate fabric flowing gracefully with each step. Her hair was styled effortlessly, and her natural beauty radiated alongside an aura of confidence and poise that left an unmistakable impression on everyone around her. Guests momentarily halted conversations, turned their heads, and exchanged glances, whispers of admiration floating through the air like delicate music. Ethan Harper's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, the chatter, the judgment, and the shallow glances of the elite melted away, leaving only Clara. He felt a surge of pride and affection, an almost tangible heat of admiration that seemed to radiate from him. This was not merely about appearance, it was about the essence of who Clara was, her intellect, her confidence, and her ability to command respect without demanding it. In that moment, Ethan realized he no longer cared about the opinions of his superficial friends. Their whispers and subtle smirks meant nothing in the face of Clara's undeniable presence. Even among the most influential attendees, admiration was visible. Heads turned politely yet insistently, subtle nods of respect passed between those who recognized not only Clara's beauty but also the intelligence and charm she effortlessly displayed. She greeted guests with warmth and ease, her voice both articulate and engaging, and she shared laughter that felt genuine, rather than performative. Conversations that might have otherwise been stiff or hierarchical shifted naturally into more meaningful exchanges, guided by her wit and composure. Meanwhile, Ethan's friends, those who had mocked him for bringing Clara, stood frozen for a brief, disorienting moment. Their smirks faded, replaced by a mixture of astonishment and, in some cases, reluctant admiration. The shallow jokes and underestimations that had fueled their amusement now seemed petty and inconsequential. Clara's elegance and intelligence had dismantled the social hierarchy they clung to, proving that status alone did not dictate respect or attention. Ethan's chest swelled with pride, knowing that he had chosen wisely, guided by appreciation for character rather than by fear of ridicule. A shift occurred on the dance floor. As the orchestra's soft notes transitioned into a waltz, Ethan extended his hand to Clara, and she placed hers in his without hesitation. Together, they glided effortlessly across the polished marble, moving with a synchronicity that drew subtle murmurs of awe from nearby guests. The connection between them was palpable, the energy radiating from their shared movements captured attention far beyond the immediate circle, transforming their presence into a quiet spectacle of grace and authenticity. Close-ups revealed a cascade of reactions across the room. Ethan's friends stared, jaws slightly slack, unable to reconcile their preconceived judgments with the poised, intelligent woman commanding attention beside him. Guests who had been initially indifferent now watched with visible appreciation, exchanging approving glances and subtle nods. Ethan himself could hardly look away, mesmerized by Clara's ease, her charm, and the way she had shifted the room's dynamics without effort. As the waltz continued, Ethan felt a profound shift within himself. The superficial metrics that had long dictated his social interactions, wealth, titles, appearances, suddenly seemed irrelevant. Clara's presence was a living testament to the fact that genuine character, intelligence, and authenticity outshone all the trappings of society. He realized that admiration and respect were not something to be sought from those incapable of seeing beyond the surface. They were something that emerged naturally when someone carried integrity and grace. For Clara, the moment was both exhilarating and affirming. She noticed the subtle pride and awe in Ethan's eyes, the genuine warmth that radiated from him. Their connection, previously contained within professional respect and understated camaraderie, now blossomed into something undeniable, a shared understanding, mutual admiration, and the first real glimpse of deeper emotion. Together, they were celebrated without pretense, not for wealth or title, but for authenticity and shared presence. The music swelled, the chandeliers glittered above, and for a fleeting, breathtaking moment, Ethan and Clara were at the center of admiration, awe, and subtle reverence. The mockery of the past evaporated, replaced entirely by respect and acknowledgement. Ethan Harper understood fully, finally, that this night, and Clara's radiant entrance, would forever change the way he perceived friendship, admiration, and what it truly meant to be seen. The Harlington Charity Ball had begun its slow descent into the soft murmur of the evening's final hours. The music softened, chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow, and the crowd gradually thinned as guests lingered over quiet conversations or prepared to depart. Ethan Harper stood near a tall window, gazing out at the city skyline sparkling beneath the night sky. The events of the evening, the dances, the whispers, the subtle triumphs and surprises, settled over him like a tide, leaving a clarity he had rarely felt in years. His thoughts returned to Clara. She had been the quiet center of the night's energy, gracefully navigating social scrutiny while commanding genuine admiration from those who had underestimated her. The realization struck him fully. The approval of shallow friends and judgmental elites was meaningless compared to the authenticity of human connection. He had spent decades chasing status and recognition, yet it was Clara's presence, her intelligence, and her warmth that had made this night unforgettable. Genuine connection and the possibility of love, he realized, were worth infinitely more than societal applause. Clara approached him quietly, a soft smile lighting her face. Her gown flowed gracefully, and the subtle sparkle in her eyes mirrored the twinkle of the chandeliers above. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that made the noise of the room fade, "thank you, for tonight, for seeing me for more than just my role. For letting me be myself." There was a hint of vulnerability in her words, paired with the unspoken acknowledgement of feelings that had grown throughout the evening. Ethan felt a rush of gratitude and admiration, realizing that her subtle acknowledgement of emotional attraction mirrored the growing awareness in his own heart. Even as some of Ethan's friends approached, attempting to mask their surprise or offer half-hearted apologies for past mockery, he remained unaffected. A few nodded awkwardly, while others attempted compliments that felt forced. Ethan's mind, however, was entirely focused on Clara. He understood that the shallow opinions of those who had once amused themselves at his expense no longer mattered. The validation he had long sought in approval and status was irrelevant. What truly mattered was the bond he shared with Clara, forged through respect, admiration, and the authenticity they had cultivated together throughout the evening. As the final notes of the orchestra faded, the room emptied, leaving only the soft echo of conversation and the occasional laughter drifting from distant corners. Ethan and Clara remained near the window, the city lights shimmering below them, casting long reflections across the marble floor. There was a quiet intimacy in the moment, a shared understanding of the significance of the evening. Ethan reached gently for Clara's hand, a first subtle gesture that carried both comfort and unspoken emotion. She accepted it, her fingers intertwining with his, their connection tangible yet delicate, a promise of what could be, without words. Ethan's internal monologue reflected on the transformations of the night, The courage he had found in standing up for Clara, the admiration he had felt for her poise and intelligence, and the awakening of a deeper desire for companionship. This night, he realized, marked not only a turning point in his social life but also the beginning of personal growth, a journey toward understanding what truly mattered in relationships and life. Clara's presence had been the catalyst, showing him that vulnerability and authenticity could coexist with strength and confidence. As they lingered in quiet conversation, Ethan knew that this was more than the end of a ball, it was the start of something profound. With Clara by his side, he felt the first true stirrings of love and partnership, an emotional foundation built on respect, admiration, and shared experience. The night had revealed that genuine connection, not societal approval, was the true measure of fulfillment, and that realization would guide him forward, shaping both his heart and his life. The Grand Harlington estate had begun to quiet, the glittering chandeliers dimmed as staff began to discreetly clear the final remnants of the evening. Guests in elegant gowns and tuxedos drifted toward carriages and waiting limousines, exchanging polite farewells and hushed compliments. Ethan Harper and Clara Bennett moved together through the slowly emptying ballroom, the energy of the night still lingering around them like a gentle echo. Each step toward the exit felt lighter than the last, the tension that had accompanied the evening replaced by a sense of calm and fulfillment. Outside, the cool night air brushed against their faces as they stepped into the awaiting limousine. The city lights stretched out before them, a tapestry of twinkling illumination that mirrored the sparkle of the ball. Clara adjusted her gown slightly, and Ethan offered a small, encouraging smile. For the first time that night, they could simply breathe, unobserved and unjudged by the expectations of society. The intimacy of the moment, quiet yet significant, was a stark contrast to the grandeur they had just left behind. As the car rolled smoothly through the streets, they reflected on the evening together. "You handled everything with such grace," Ethan said quietly, glancing at Clara with genuine admiration. "I couldn't have imagined it going any better, not just for me, but for you." Clara's smile deepened, her eyes reflecting a mixture of warmth, pride, and subtle affection. "It was special," she replied softly, "and I'm grateful. Not just for tonight, but for how you've seen me. Truly seen me." The quiet honesty of their exchange created a bridge between them, a shared acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing throughout the evening. The limousine passed by familiar faces along the route, some of Ethan's social circle who had remained outside the estate. Their expressions, once tinged with judgment or amusement, now carried hints of respect and quiet admiration. The subtle shift in their perception was not lost on Ethan. He realized that by standing firm and bringing Clara into his world with confidence, he had not only redefined his own standards but also challenged the shallow assumptions of his peers. Respect, he now understood, was earned through authenticity, not appearances. Inside the car, a gentle moment of connection occurred. Ethan reached for Clara's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The contact was simple, yet it carried a world of meaning, a promise of trust, mutual admiration, and the first sparks of romance that neither had fully named but both felt. Clara rested her hand lightly in his, a small gesture that spoke volumes, reinforcing the bond that had been forged through shared experiences, courage, and quiet vulnerability. Ethan's thoughts wandered as he watched her hand in his. He reflected on the journey of the evening, from social anxiety and ridicule to triumph and genuine admiration. The realization settled in his chest with a sense of clarity and fulfillment. He had found someone who not only complemented his life but enriched it in ways that wealth, status, and superficial approval never could. Clara was more than an assistant, more than a companion for a single evening. She was someone who saw him fully, and whom he wanted to see, protect, and cherish in return. As the limousine glided toward the quiet streets leading to their destination, Ethan allowed himself a final, profound thought. The night had been more than a social triumph. It had marked the beginning of new beginnings, love, partnership, and the shared navigation of life beyond judgment and expectation. He no longer felt the gnawing loneliness that had defined his existence for so long. With Clara by his side, he understood the value of genuine connection, the beauty of shared trust, and the promise of future possibilities. The car slowed as they arrived at Ethan's residence. Stepping out into the soft glow of the entrance lights, he glanced at Clara, his heart swelling with quiet certainty. "Tonight was perfect," he said gently, a subtle smile crossing his lips. She returned it, her eyes reflecting a mixture of warmth and anticipation. And in that moment, Ethan Harper, once defined by solitude, finally understood the profound truth. He had found someone who truly saw him, and in turn, he truly saw her.